My mother kicked me out to give my room to my pregnant sister. Years later, my grandparents evicted her from the house they bought, and now I live there with everything paid while she's homeless. I'm 19 years old. I'm in college with a scholarship that changed my life, and I basically just got back everything that was taken from me a year ago, when my mother and stepfather kicked me out of the house to make room for my pregnant half-sister. I know it sounds dramatic, but wait until you hear the whole story, because what happened after is something I never imagined, and it has to do with my maternal grandparents who I never met until recently. The thing is complicated. Very complicated. And I need to tell it, because I'm still processing all of this. Let me start from the beginning. Or from before I was born, because that's important to understand why my life was the way it was. My mom, Rebecca, had my half-sister Amber when she was in college, with a guy named Jason. You know, the typical college romance that ends badly, but they have to keep seeing each other because there's a baby involved. According to what my grandparents told me later, Jason had drug problems at that time. He was a total mess. But my mom always had this thing about wanting to save him or something. Eventually they broke up but kept co-parenting Amber, which I guess is the responsible thing to do, right? But this is where everything gets weird. My mom met another man, Thomas, and married him. And honestly, everything seemed to be fine for a while. But it turns out my mom never stopped seeing Jason. And I don't mean just as co-parents, I mean they had an affair while she was married to Thomas. She got pregnant with me during that affair. Thomas found out everything when my mom was already pregnant. They obviously got divorced, and she married Jason almost immediately. I was born, and 7 months later, Thomas died in a car accident. I never met him. I don't even have pictures of him because my mom basically erased his existence from our lives. So I grew up in this house with my mom, Jason, who is technically my stepfather but also Amber's biological dad, and my half-sister who is, 5 years older than me. And let me tell you, I never, ever felt like part of that family. Jason was always distant with me, cold, as if my existence was a constant reminder of the affair and the chaos of that time. Amber didn't treat me like a sister either, more like an intruder in her perfect family. My mom always favored the two of them. Always. And I just learned to live in that dynamic, where I was the outsider in my own home. What I didn't know, and this is super important, is that my maternal grandparents never agreed with any of this. When my mom decided to marry Jason after all the drama of the affair and the divorce, my grandparents gave her an ultimatum. Us or him. My mom chose Jason and basically cut off all contact with her own parents. She erased them from her life completely. I grew up without knowing them, without knowing practically anything about them, and my mom always painted them as horrible and controlling people who didn't support her. That was the narrative my whole childhood, that my grandparents were the villains of the story. 6 years ago, when I was 13, something happened that at the time I didn't understand, but now makes total sense. My grandparents, even though my mom wasn't talking to them, bought a house for us. Yeah, they literally bought the house where we lived. They put it in my mom's name with the hope that it would be a bridge to reconcile, to have a relationship with their daughter again and meet their granddaughters. My mom accepted the house. Obviously. Who wouldn't accept a free house, right? But basically told them thanks and goodbye. I don't want anything else to do with you. My grandparents tried to connect, sent letters, called, but my mom rejected them again and again. I didn't know any of this at the time. For me, that house was just our house. I had no idea there was this whole history behind it. Fast forward to a year and a half ago. I was 18, finishing my senior year of high school, and Amber was 24 and still living at home, which was never a problem for my parents, but when I wanted to stay after graduation, it was a completely different topic. Turns out Amber got pregnant, and suddenly the house that was big enough for all of us wasn't anymore. They needed space for the baby. They needed to convert my room into a nursery. They needed this and that. And the solution they found was, literally, to kick me out. It was 2 weeks before my final exams when my mom sat down with me and told me, very casually, that I needed to find another place to live because Amber needed my room. I thought she was joking at first. I mean, seriously? 2 weeks before I graduate? Right when I'm applying for scholarships and colleges? But no, she was completely serious. She told me it was time for me to take responsibility for my life, that I was already an adult, that they couldn't support me forever. Jason just nodded at everything she said. Didn't even look me in the eyes. Amber was there too, on the couch with her barely visible belly. And she didn't say anything, not a word in my defense. I tried to reason with them, told them I could share a room with Amber temporarily, that the baby could be in her room, that please give me at least until after finals. But no, the decision was already made. My mom gave me like a week to get my stuff out. 1 week. After 18 years of living there, they gave me 1 week to disappear from their lives. And the most horrible thing is that my mom said it with this attitude of, I'm doing you a favor, I'm teaching you to be independent. As if she was giving me some kind of valuable life lesson instead of just abandoning me. I had nowhere to go. Seriously. I didn't have close family that I knew of. I didn't have savings because they never let me work during high school. My mom said I should focus on studies. Ironic, considering she later kicked me out right when I most needed to focus on studies. And I was in the middle of college, applications and exams. I called my best friend crying, like hysterical, and she talked to her parents that same night. They, who were basically strangers to me even though I'd seen them 1,000 times, told me I could stay with them as long as I needed. So I packed my things in a couple of suitcases because I didn't have much either, honestly. And I went to live with my best friend's family. My friend's parents were incredible. They didn't charge me rent. They gave me a room to myself. They included me in family dinners. They asked me how my studies were going. It was everything my own family never was with me, you know? I graduated from high school living with them, applied to colleges from their house, and cried when I received the acceptance letter with a full scholarship because it meant I was really going to be able to get ahead without depending on my parents. During all that time, my mom didn't call me once. Jason didn't either. It was as if I had stopped existing for them. The moment I crossed that door with my suitcases, I got into college with a scholarship that covered almost everything, but I still needed money for books, transportation, food, all those things that add up. I took out a small student loan and got a part-time job on campus. It was exhausting. Like I had classes all day and then worked evenings and weekends. But I didn't care, because for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that was mine, that nobody could take away from me. My best friend's parents didn't charge me rent, but I insisted on buying my own food and helping with what I could. I didn't want to be a burden. Like a year after they kicked me out, my mom started sending me emails. Not text messages, not calls, but formal and cold emails where she asked me how I was, told me about Amber's baby, a girl who had already been born by then, and basically tried to act like everything was normal between us. She never apologized, never acknowledged what they did to me. She just wanted to resume contact as if nothing had happened. I responded super politely but distantly, like, I'm fine, thanks for asking, without giving real details about my life. I didn't trust her, and I didn't want to be in a situation where she could hurt me again either. Then, like 3 months ago, everything changed completely. My maternal grandparents, who I had never met and who I barely knew existed, had a health scare. It wasn't anything super serious in the end, but it was enough for them to decide they needed to reconnect with their family before it was too late. They went to the house they had bought 6 years earlier, hoping to talk to my mom and finally meet their granddaughters. My mom didn't open the door for them at first, but my grandparents are persistent and basically refused to leave until she talked to them. During that conversation, which from what I understand was super tense and full of recriminations on both sides, my grandparents asked about me. My grandmother specifically wanted to meet me, wanted to know how her younger granddaughter was, and that's where things got interesting, because my mom, in her infinite audacity, told them I was in college, living my life, super happy and successful. She didn't mention she had kicked me out, didn't mention I wasn't living with them, basically painted this picture of a happy family where I had decided to leave on my own to be independent. But Amber, my dear half-sister Amber, couldn't keep her mouth shut. At some point in the conversation, she said something like, yeah, and now I have her room for the baby. And my grandparents obviously asked what she meant by that. My mom tried to change the subject, but it was too late. My grandparents pressed until she finally admitted she had asked me to leave the previous year. She didn't say she kicked me out, obviously, but painted it as a mutual decision. But my grandparents aren't stupid and realized something didn't add up. After that visit, my grandparents started investigating on their own. I don't know exactly how they got my information. I guess they asked at the university or something. But suddenly I received an email from my grandmother asking if we could meet to talk. At first I thought it was spam or something weird. But then I saw the last name, and realized who it was. I was super nervous, like I didn't know what to expect, but I agreed to see them at a cafe near campus. Meeting my grandparents was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. My grandmother cried when she saw me, hugged me as if she'd known me all my life, and my grandfather had this expression of sadness mixed with anger that confused me a bit at first. We sat down and they started telling me the whole story. I didn't know. My mom's affair, the ultimatum, buying the house, all the attempts they had made over the years to be in our lives and how my mom had rejected them again and again. I couldn't believe it. I mean, some things were starting to make sense, but others left me in total shock. My grandmother asked me directly what had happened, why I wasn't living with my mom anymore, and I told them everything. I told them about how I was always the stranger in that house, about how Jason never treated me like his daughter despite raising Amber as such, about how they kicked me out 2 weeks before my finals to give my room to Amber and her baby. I told them about my best friend's family that took me in, about my scholarship, about the student loan and my part-time job. My grandmother cried while I talked, and my grandfather was getting angrier and angrier, like I could see his jaw tensing every time I mentioned something particularly horrible. When I finished telling my story, my grandparents looked at each other with this expression I couldn't completely decipher, and my grandfather told me something that left me frozen. He told me, "Harper, that house where you lived, where your mom kicked you out, is our house. We bought it 6 years ago, hoping to reconnect with your mom and meet you and Amber. We put it in your mom's name for legal reasons, but with the understanding that it was for you all to live there as a family. And your mom used us, took the house, and threw us out of her life again." I didn't know what to say. I literally stood there with my mouth open, processing that information. It meant my mom had kicked me out of a house that wasn't even technically hers, a house my grandparents had bought specifically so I would have a stable home. My grandfather continued explaining that legally, they were still the real owners, because they had only put the house in my mom's name as a gesture of good faith, but that all the real papers and rights were still in their name. And then my grandmother asked me a question I never imagined I'd have to answer. She asked me if I wanted them to evict my mom, Jason, and Amber from the house. Just like that, direct, no beating around the bush. They explained they had every legal right to do it, that they had consulted with lawyers and that the eviction process would be relatively simple. But they wanted to know what I wanted, because at the end of the day, I was their granddaughter and they had lost 18 years of my life because of my mom's decisions. And now they wanted me to be part of their lives the way I always should have been. Honestly, I didn't know how to answer at that moment. Part of me, the part that still had some loyalty to my mom despite everything, thought it was too cruel, that they couldn't throw a family with a small baby out on the street. But another part of me, the part that had cried alone in my car the day they kicked me out, the part that worked double shifts to pay for my books, while Amber posted pictures of the baby's room, my old room, on Instagram. That part wanted them to feel even a little bit of what I felt. I told them I needed time to think about it, and my grandparents understood perfectly. They gave me their number, told me to call when I was ready, and promised me that no matter what I decided, they wanted to be part of my life from now on. I spent like a week thinking about it, talking to my best friend and her parents about what to do. They told me that whatever decision I made would be okay, that it was my decision and they would support me. I finally decided yes, that my grandparents should get their house back. I didn't do it for revenge. Okay, maybe a little bit for revenge, but because I felt it was fair. They had bought that house with good intentions, and my mom had abused their generosity, first by rejecting them despite accepting the house, and then by kicking me out, her own daughter, when it was convenient for her. I called my grandparents and told them my decision. My grandfather told me he would start the eviction process immediately, that they would give them the legally required time to find another place. You think it's like 30 days or something. But that the house would officially be theirs again. They also told me that when everything was ready, if I wanted, I could move in with them. They said they would finally have the opportunity to be the grandparents they always wanted to be, and that they wanted to make up for all those lost years. The eviction process started like 2 months after that decision. My grandparents were formal with everything, using lawyers and following all legal procedures to the letter. When my mom received the papers, apparently she went into total panic. She sent me a long email, full of capital letters and exclamation points, accusing me of putting ideas in my grandparents' heads, of being an ungrateful daughter, of ruining Amber's and her baby's life. She said horrible things, Like that she wished I had died instead of Thomas, my biological father. That I had always been a mistake. That she had never really loved me. It was devastating to read. I'm not going to lie, but it was also liberating in a certain sense because it confirmed what I had always felt. That I was never really part of that family. I didn't respond to that email. I blocked her email, blocked her number, blocked Jason and Amber on all my social media. My grandparents told me not to worry about anything, that they would take care of the whole legal process and that I should just focus on school and taking care of myself. The eviction followed its course, and like 3 weeks ago they finally moved out. I don't know where they went. I didn't ask, and honestly I don't care. 2 weeks ago I moved into the house with my grandparents. It's weird being in the same house where I grew up but under completely different circumstances, you know? My grandmother converted one of the guest rooms into my room. He didn't want the one that had been mine, because now it has all of Amber's baby stuff. And it's weird. And they're trying to get to know me and for me to get to know them. They tell me stories about my mom when she was young. They show me family photos I had never seen. They talk to me about Thomas, my biological father, with so much affection that it makes me cry because I never had the opportunity to meet him. Last week we celebrated Thanksgiving here, with all my grandparents' extended family that I didn't know either. Cousins, aunts, and uncles, all these people who should have been part of my life all along, but that my mom denied me because of her stubbornness and selfish decisions. They also invited my best friend and her parents, because my grandparents said they were family too for everything they did for me when I needed it most. It was nice, really nice, sitting at that table surrounded by people who really care about me and don't just see me as a nuisance or an uncomfortable reminder of the past. My grandparents are paying for the rest of my college now. I don't need the student loan or to work so many hours anymore. They told me they want me to focus on studying and discovering who I am without all the financial stress I had before. I'm also going to therapy, which my grandparents are also paying for, because I have a lot to process about my childhood, about the abandonment, about all this family drama that exploded in the last few months. I haven't heard anything from my mom since that horrible email, and she doesn't know where I'm living now. I know she'll eventually find out, because it's not such a big town and people talk. But for now, I'm enjoying this peace of not having to deal with her drama. Amber hasn't tried to contact me either, which doesn't surprise me at all. Jason, even less. It's as if that part of my life just closed. And although there's pain, and there probably always will be, there's also a lot of relief. My grandparents ask me often if I regret making the decision to evict them, and I tell them no, that it was the right thing. I didn't do it to hurt them, although I recognize it probably did hurt them, but because it was the natural consequence of their actions. They decided to kick me out when it was convenient for them, without thinking about how it would affect me, and now they face the consequences of that decision. I guess that's the lesson my mom wanted to teach me about being responsible for your actions, except the lesson ended up being for her, not for me. The other day, my grandmother and I were cooking together. She's trying to teach me family recipe, and she told me something that stuck with me. She told me, "Harper, I'm so sorry you had to go through everything you went through, but I'm grateful that all this brought you back to us. I would have preferred we'd been in your life from the beginning, but I'm glad that at least we can be here now." And that's what I try to focus on the now and the future, not on all the lost time or the family I'm never going to have with my mom. There are still difficult days, where I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have forgiven my mom, if maybe I'm the bad guy in this story. But then I remember how I felt that day when they kicked me out, how I cried in my friend's room wondering what I had done wrong to deserve that, and I remember I didn't do anything wrong. I was just born into a complicated situation with a mom who never got over her own problems and a stepfather who never saw me as more than a reminder of past mistakes. Now I have what I always wanted without knowing I wanted it, a family that loves me unconditionally, a home where I'm welcome, and the opportunity to build my future without carrying all the emotional and financial weight alone. My grandparents say I'm resilient, that they're impressed by how I was able to get ahead after everything, but the truth is I just did what I had to do to survive. And now that I don't have to be in survival mode all the time, I'm starting to discover who I am beyond all that trauma. I don't know what will happen in the future with my mom. Maybe someday she'll want to try to reconnect. Maybe not. My grandparents say that door will never be completely closed if I decide to open it, but they're also not in a hurry because first they want to make sure I'm okay and emotionally stable. For now, I'm fine with not having contact, with letting that chapter of my life stay behind while I write new chapters with the people who really care about me. The irony of this whole situation doesn't escape me. My mom spent years rejecting her own parents, creating this narrative that they were the bad people, and in the end, her selfishness and her decisions led her to lose not only her parents but also me. And the house that mattered so much to her, the house that was worth more to her than I was, ended up being the instrument of her own downfall. There's something poetically just about that, I guess, although I'm not sure if I should feel good about thinking it. What I do know is that I'm exactly where I need to be, surrounded by people who value me and love me for who I am, not for what I represent or how convenient my existence is for them. And that, after everything I went through, feels like finally coming home.